So we'll start right at 12 o'clock, and we've got on the agenda, we've got on our workshop, we've got the Municap is going to speak first about the special taxing district. I would say that they'll give us a quick slide presentation, and then we'll get to the rest of the meeting.
Kimberly, do you need to share a screen?
No, I'm legal counsel. So Municap, I think, may have or had their own presentation, but I do not have any slides to show. This is more of a verbal legal advice discussion.
Gotcha.
Hey, let me clarify Kimberly Menn's role. The Municap already gave us some ideas about how they want to finance the Southfields PUD. It's an enormous amount of money involved in that because of the nature and extent of that development. Well, they want to establish a special taxing district that would cover that roughly 633 acres of land incorporated in those parcels. And Kimberly Menn with Whiteford, Taylor and Preston is counsel for the town. I asked her to give a presentation briefly, or a discussion briefly, about to the board, excuse me, about what a special taxing district is, what it's supposed to accomplish, and how do you implement it. So Kimberly is here as our counsel to give us legal guidance on our end of it.
Perfect. Municap is going to be on also. Is that correct?
Not that I'm aware of.
Were they coming on today, Michelle, or was we just getting advice from
Counsel.
Counsel?
When I first spoke with them, I simply just scheduled it for Municap. So I think this is probably just your introduction with counsel. I'm trying to find out if we have anybody else online.
Well, then listen, we can move forward. Kimberly, welcome. Glad to have you on board on the team. And we're going to open this workshop up. It's 12 o'clock, so we'll be able to move forward here. Kimberly, can you give the board some type of understanding of exactly what this means, a special taxing district, how it affects us, what you think the pros and cons are, if you could. Let's give it a couple seconds because I see Commissioner Massimiliano is coming on now.
Just made it.
Okay, perfect. Okay, Kimberly, give us some of the do's and don'ts, and you could probably mute. Well, you don't need to mute anyone. Everyone will be nice and quiet. Go ahead, Kim.
Sure, happy to. I'll first introduce myself a little bit, and then go into really a brief description or overview of the special taxing district legislation, how that functions with municipalities, how that relates to the projects. I would encourage you can interrupt and ask me questions at any time. I'm familiar with the information, and so you won't, I don't have a script, let's put it that way, as far as how the conversation can evolve, because I know that when I work with different commissioners and municipalities, everybody has different kinds of concerns and different levels of understanding on how this works. As I understand it, this would be the town's first special taxing district. So just very briefly, I'm a partner with the firm Whiteford, Taylor and Preston. I specialize in public finance and also public-private partnerships. I know that our firm has worked with the town in the past through Paul Madden. I have been with the firm as a partner for actually just over 4 years. I moved over from a different firm and was brought over to lead up the public finance practice group, which is what I do at Whiteford, Taylor and Preston. I also have a little bit of a background in commercial real estate and development, so I've worked on large projects just like these. I think that actually will offers a benefit to all of my municipal clients, because I do have a very strong understanding of development, underwriting, how developers even think, which, sometimes doesn't necessarily work like the rest of us. and, you know, and what goes into the projects of this magnitude. So I know you've had a brief discussion with MuniCap. They are what I would call sort of one of the leading financial advisors in special taxing districts.
Kimberly, I'm going to interrupt you real quick if I could.
Yeah.
Lou George and myself have had an interview with MuniCap, but the rest of the board has not seen that presentation.
Got it. Okay. Okay. Very helpful. Then thank you. MuniCap has apparently been retained by the developer, which is not a surprise. I think they probably do 90% of every special taxing district or TIF structure, certainly in the state of Maryland, and they're even active regionally and nationally. I'm going to go through very generally speaking what this is designed to do. So, as you know, as a governmental entity, you can issue bonds, right? You can issue bonds to pay for your water, wastewater. You can issue bonds to pay for other capital improvement projects. You can issue bonds in anticipation of tax revenues. As a municipality in the state of Maryland, this is a power that you have. And it's a power that you have through statute, and it's also a power that you have through charter. And typically, when you as the government borrow money, and, you know, I've worked with all kinds of municipalities, and people have very different feelings about whether and how much you want to finance anything. And when you do borrow, because that is a legal power that you have, you are able to pay for that water, wastewater treatment facility, and then pay it back over time by issuing debt in the form of bonds. And so those bonds are typically paid back through a general obligation of the town. That is not what this is. A general obligation of the town is basically a promise to pay, and the town has to backstop that promise by finding the money to pay somebody back. That's one sort of debt that I just want to start the conversation with saying that this is not, and this structure with a special tax district is not a general obligation. Another kind of obligation that a town or municipality can issue and has the power to issue by statute is an obligation that's paid back simply from one particular source of revenue. And a special taxing district is a way of generating and segregating a particular form of revenues for the repayment of this obligation. So the developers come to you, and they have this really pretty map of all these different uses and homes and development and mixed use with warehouse facilities. And, you know, that can be a huge benefit to a town. It increases tax base, it increases population density sometimes. You know, some people have feelings about whether that's a good or bad thing. But there is generally an impression that a development would result in a benefit to a town or a municipality. And the developer is going to come to you and say, look, you know, we're going to build all these things, but what would really be nice is if the town were to assist us in paying for and developing, in this example, a road that goes through and serves this particular property where a road doesn't necessarily exist before. And there are two ways that the town can agree to do that with this special type of legislation. Again, I'm going to tell you what this is not. This is not a tax increment financing. A tax increment financing is when a town agrees to take all of the extra tax revenues that this property could be generating because of the development and agrees to use those tax revenues to repay these bonds. That is not what the town is being asked to do, specifically because, you know, that is an agreement by the town to take a benefit that would otherwise not be there and use that to repay. Instead, the town is going to be keeping the benefit of the tax increment that will be generated by this development. So if there is a parcel of property out there that pays $10, you got to remember I'm a lawyer, so I'm not going to do complicated math. If you have a tax parcel that generates $10 of taxes on an undeveloped piece of property, and now they're going to put a house on that piece of property, and that house now is going to have an assessment and it's going to generate $15 worth of tax. Okay, the town is going to get the benefit of the $5 worth of tax. I mean, to the extent that that, you know, gets allocated amongst you in the county and the state. So that's called increment, and that is a benefit that's going to continue to pass to the town. And so sometimes you can finance and repay the road with that increment that's generated and pledge that, but that's not what's being requested here. So I've started out by telling you what this is not. This is not a general obligation of the town. This is not a pledge of the increased tax base and the tax revenues that could be generated by this development. Though that is still going to accrete to the town. What we are doing, and this is why I always hesitate to use the terminology of a special tax district, because it really doesn't work so much like a tax. I mean, it does procedurally, you know, it is something that's assessed on the property. There is a lien that gets placed on the property, but really this is going to work more like an assessment. So they are asking you to build the road, and then the property owners that are going to be in this district that the town would draw a line around and contain the district to the particular properties that agree to be in the district. Those properties will get an additional assessment in addition to the taxes that they would otherwise be obligated to pay, and is that assessment that is going to be used to repay the road. So the town here is acting in a facilitating capacity. It's not agreeing to use its own money to pay for the road or to repay the road. It's not using the additional taxes it expects to receive to pay for the road. It is agreeing to create through legislation, and that's done through an ordinance, under the authority of the local government article, and it's agreeing to create the special tax district and create a vehicle by which assessments can be collected from these specific property owners, and those assessments are the sole source for the repayment of the bonds that are issued to pay for the road. I want to pause there. Does anybody have yet a question about the three different kinds of obligations and which one this is specifically?
I think you're doing pretty good.
Okay, great. I wanted to be a law professor when I was in law school, and then I figured out that in private practice, I'm actually still educating people every day, and now I don't have to write articles that nobody is going to read. Anyway, yeah.
The only comment, I guess the only comment I wanted to add is when you draw this circle around, and in this case, it would be Southfields, there's currently no one in that district that that's not, how do I want to put this? There's no construction in that district.
No improvements.
There's no improvements in that district, so we're not affecting anyone other than the people that are going to be moving into that district, and they'll be aware of this special assessment if this is something we choose to do.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So there is authority by statute. As I understand it, it's only the property owners that are, and basically there's going to be some unanimity because only the property owners receiving the benefit of this road who have elected to be included in the district will be the ones paying for it. And that's going to be, you know, there's a notice process, there is a petition process, and a means by which people include themselves in the district through this public notice process. And that's one thing that I found that there's a lot of sensitivity to and communication that needs to happen is, you know, there are public notice requirements in establishing a district. And this is why I really do hesitate and try not to use the term tax, because when we send out a notice that there are going to be specific properties included in the special taxing district and be assessed these assessments, we do want to be very clear with other constituents that the town is not doing two things. It is not creating an additional tax for any other of its constituents that have not elected to be in this taxing district, and it is not taking revenues that the town otherwise would have and use those revenues to pay for this. This is really almost a private agreement between these particular owners to pay these additional assessments to pay back for the road. Look, it's really hard to borrow money to pay for a road, right? Like when a developer is looking for funds to finance that improvements, roads don't pay rent. Roads typically cost money. This road doesn't benefit just one property owner, so one property owner isn't going to team up and build it. This is a means by which all of the property owners team up together and agree to repay the bonds to pay for the road. And so when we're communicating with constituents, and you know, it very well may be that as this ordinance gets introduced, you're going to be having it introduced at a meeting, just like with your typical ordinance process. There's going to be a public notice. There could be questions that arise, and one thing that I find is early assuring constituents that this is not an additional tax. This really works more like an assessment on certain properties. It's very similar to an HOA, right? If you move into a neighborhood that has its own special assessment organization, then it works similar to that. I might have a question.
No, I'm sorry. I made a comment that's exactly what it sounded like to me, was like an HOA. To some degree, but I do have a question. You're talking about having these public notices and people have to agree to do it, but how in God's name do you do that when there's nobody living there? I mean, I don't understand. I feel like we're putting the cart before the horse. And how would you do it until it's completely built out?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that last part?
Yeah, how would you do it until it is completely build out?
Okay, so that's a great segue for me to describe to you how the transaction works. Okay. Because you are correct. You are identifying a very specific and common, what we'll call underwriting question, meaning, okay, we're going to do this development. Let's make sure that it works, because we want to make sure that the revenues and the owners are there to pay the assessments. So so this is what is going to happen in sequence. Right now you're in the position where the property, where one of the developers, I believe he's under contract to purchase the property, is collecting a couple of neighboring owners to come together and ask the town to create a special taxing district around the boundaries of this particular property. And as the owners they are able to do that. Now, these owners are going to own, a couple hundred acres each. And what they're presenting to the town is plans for what they plan to do with those large portions of property. It looks like there's a couple of single-family home neighborhoods. I see a couple of commercial properties. There looks like there's this pretty neat sports complex, and then there's some industrial or light industrial commercial uses. So when they are subject themselves to the special taxing district, they're agreeing on behalf of all of this property that they own that once they join the district, because it's usually done in two steps. You create the district and then you authorize the bonds. So they're saying, if you include us in this district, we're going to agree to pay the assessments that are going to be due and payable to repay the bonds that will be issued. And we usually do this in sort of a 1-2 step process. So then those large parcels of property are going to be subdivided, they're going to be chopped up, they're going to be developed for their different uses. And there's actually going to be a formula, and this is where MuniCap does the work, is they come up with a formula on how they're going to allocate the assessment among the property. So here's another easy math example. Say that you are going to have, that not you, but that the bonds are going to require $10 a year to pay them back. They're going to decide that perhaps the single family home development pays $2 a year of that $10. And if there are 20 houses in that development, then each house is paying 10 cents a year. So they're going to, MuniCap is going to work with the developers on how they apportion the assessment so that ultimately each independent owner has a particular responsibility relating to the special tax. And so those owners, when they buy, just like when you buy subject to an HOA, you are going to be buying your house knowing that you're going to pay that extra 10 cents that goes back to pay for the road.
So Kimberly, this is Commissioner Piner. So what I'm hearing is, instead of 20 people having to worry about trying to get the payment towards the taxes, you really have 1 or 2 management type of people that's handling that for us and making sure that we have the funding coming to us without having to go to 20 different customers, right? Is that what you're saying? One person really
no.
handling it instead of am I confusing?
Well, the enforcer is always going to be the county, because it's the county that collects the taxes. The process that I'm walking you through is these first initial owners are going to be working with MuniCap as they decide how much they can borrow and repay as to what each particular owner down the road is going to be responsible for. And then that amount gets added to the tax bill, collected with the taxes, just like everything else they have to pay. They're just going to have one additional number added to that line. And then those owners are going to face the very same consequences that any owner would face if they don't pay their taxes.
All right.
And then, does that make sense?
That clears my answer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the county will actually be, grouping those funds together and transferring those special tax or assessment revenues for the repayment of the bond. So they'll be transferring them to the fund that repays the bonds, because part of the statute provides for you being able to set up a pot of money for that all of those revenues to go to that are available to pay the bond. So the money, the town isn't essentially writing that check, but it does act as the conduit or the vehicle, on how that money gets into the special fund, because it participates in the collection of the taxes, which is largely something that the county will be doing. So there's not a lot of activity much for the town to do.
I have a quick question, if I may. Wake Dudley with the Cecil County Board of Realtors. You're mentioning it's similar to a HOA, but most HOAs don't go away. I assume the special taxing district, once the bonds are paid off that it's being set up for, the special tax goes away. Is that correct?
Yes. So there is a provision in the statute that once the bonds go away, that the special taxing district and the special tax will, no longer be required or in existence. So there is really an end date. Now, that special taxing district could, in 25 years, decide maybe they need a wider road and could approach the town again to issue bonds to pay for those enhancements and then sort of sign on up for another period of time. But that would be a completely different transaction. These owners are going to sign up knowing, at least for this specific assessment, to your point, it ends when the bonds are repaid.
Okay. Thank you.
So when you're creating the special taxing district, and that all there's a whole process associated with that, and the town passes the ordinance to do that. It's a very straightforward ordinance process, just what you're used to doing. Then there is, the second ordinance that's typically passed shortly thereafter that authorizes a specific amount of bonds and the town's ability to issue those bonds. And those bonds are going to be tax exempt because, truthfully, like, this road is a public benefit. And, the town issuing bonds to create something like a public improvement, like a road or sewer facilities or water facilities, there's a whole list of things that this can be used for, then those are considered tax exempt. And so as a tax attorney, I would be reviewing and confirming that all of the requirements are being met so that these bonds can be considered tax exempt, including agreements for specifically what the money is to be used for. You are not going to be issuing bonds and handing a pot over to a developer for them to just spend. There are specific itemized improvements that these particular bonds will be used for and to pay for. So there is also, the ability of you as the commissioners in the town to very specifically demonstrate what the public benefit is of this particular roadway. And it's not, putting money in somebody else's pocket, so to speak. And those requirements have to be met in order for these bonds to be issued. So then we'll go back to another question. The bonds are issued and there's money, and yet, there's nothing there yet. There's no there. So how does it get managed that these improvements are made and that the property will be developed in a manner that is sufficient to pay for the assessment to repay the bonds? And that is actually it's called a rate and method analysis. That is a very number crunching process that MuniCap does as part of their role in making sure that, for example, one property's responsibility for the assessment isn't so out of whack for what the property is going to be improved with that a property owner wouldn't want to just say, you know what, it's just not worth it, I'm going to walk away. Because even though the town's not responsible for the repayment of the bonds or the debt, but it could be a hassle. So they are very careful in monitoring and making sure that nobody is assuming too much of a burden that would put them out of balance, or if there is such a burden, I've done this where, you know, there's additional security or additional reserves that are posted to protect the repayment of the bondholders. Because remember, the town isn't responsible for paying these back, but you can be sure that there are people buying these bonds that want to make sure that they get paid back. And so the underwriter works with MuniCap in establishing this calculation and making sure that that the responsibility and the obligation gets managed in a way that assures these bondholders that they're going to get their money back. I mean, that's the lender. And then what will usually happen, because a lot of times you need the road first, is these bonds will also be funding interest expense for a period of time. You know, it will have substantial reserves so that if there's a problem kind of earlier on or a delay in development, there is money there to pay in a way that gives comfort to the bondholders. And, you know, everybody recognizes that there's typically a lag in time. And so a lot of times these bonds are structured so that the assessments don't start for another 2 or 3 years, because it needs to give the property the chance to develop and, you know, and create ownership and value on the property and owners that, you know, are there and able to pay the assessments. Even if that doesn't happen, the owner of the property is still going to be responsible to pay for those assessments. Here, what you have is, you know, really a substantial development that's going to require the coordination of, you know, the development by, I think, is 3 large property owners. And they're all going to care about and collaborate and coordinate in what their development time frame is going to be. And so that is another sort of vetting that's done by the underwriters and by MuniCap, and making sure that the pace of development and the transition of ownership and the value that is created is built in a way that tracks and can handle the debt service as it is, you know, as it becomes due. So I want to pause there. Are there any questions about, you know, how the bond issue and the financing kind of sits, you know, in the process of the development? Because you are right, this is going to happen first, but there are tools to primarily protect the bondholders, because they're the ones that it's their money that's going to be used, and they're the ones that want to get paid back. And how that, you know, permits the building of the road and the construction of the infrastructure, you know, prior to and as the rest of the development is coming together. And lots of times they look for, you know, development plans being, you know, more solidified. You know, they're going to, you know, make sure that the property has been acquired, you know, under contract like they have it. You know, for some of these particular owners, like there are all of these conditions that the underwriters will require in order to get to the point where everybody feels comfortable that the bonds will be issued and the properties will be situated in a manner that will pay it back, the debt service as it becomes due.
Kimberly, could I ask you a question?
Sure.
Kimberly? Okay, the question I have, and I'm sure the board is thinking about this, is that any potential person who wants to buy a house in this special taxing district, there's a disclosure by the realtor or whoever's handling the transaction to notify these people that there is this special tax or assessment on that property, so they know. And the question comes up is that if there's alternatives in the town of Elkton where people may go buy a home without that, what's the incentive for them to be in a special taxing district? Or is that not a question you would address as an attorney?
Well, no, I mean, I can tell you what my experience is. I can't necessarily, I think the realtor who's on the at the meeting probably has a better answer than I do, but I can tell you what I have experienced, and that is, one, because of, you know, the nature of the improvements and the way that it's getting spread out, these assessments are going to be modest at best. And a lot of times the homeowners understand, well, either, you know, they're going to pay this $10 a year, or my house payment was going to be X amount higher because the developer would have had to pay for the road itself. It's really just taking a cost that the homeowner is going to pay at the end of the day anyway, because they need the road, and just putting it in a different bucket. And it actually benefits the homeowners because it is a lot less expensive for them to pay the $10 a year over 30 years or 25 years, whatever it is, with a low interest rate because it's tax exempt. So the money is way cheaper, and it's a lot cheaper for them to do it that way than if it were to add to their home cost.
Okay, that makes sense. It makes sense because a developer is going to pay for the infrastructure and pass on that cost to the homeowner, whoever purchases the home. And in this particular case, the special tax that they might pay that pays for the infrastructure is allocated over a longer period of time at a lower interest rate and might be a benefit to them. So that might be a sales.
Yeah. And
you know,
what's more important. Okay, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Kimberly. I would also say that I think that one of the positive parts about this is that the infrastructure gets done, it's in place. We could do wider sidewalks, better amenities with lighting, a better project, and it won't turn into some of our developments that we don't have finished like we currently have today. They'll be done. Now, the downside of this is I'm still trying to find a downside. Can you tell me what the downside is?
Well, so I have been involved in projects that, to your point, you could have a really nice road to nowhere, right? Because, you know, the developments are always dependent on market situations. You know, it could be that you have a very, very nice road that goes to a neighborhood in a development, but you're not necessarily going to get the sports field or the industrial warehouse because it doesn't get leased up and built. You know, those are all developer risks and bondholder risks. I mean, the plus for the town is while it does become involved and facilitate the payment of the road, it is not paying for the road. And a lot of times developers go to towns and municipalities and say, hey, look, I'm going to build this really great thing. You need to give me a road. And public improvements, you know, can be a burden and a risk on a town to pay for out of their own pocket without the level of certainty that that could actually, you know, come to fruition. Here, there is no risk on the town in the repayment of this or building a road to nowhere because you're not responsible for the repayment. What will happen is if that developer does not pay its special assessment, then the bondholders can foreclose and take their property. But guess what? Like, those bondholders, they'll have to pay taxes on the property that they own. So even if there's a foreclosure by the bondholders on the developer's property, the town will still get the tax revenues it was always going to receive. So there's no transfer that the government's making of any of its, you know, current benefit or even future tax revenue benefit. So there really isn't a lot of downside from the town's perspective. I think the challenges I see is I think that this is a complicated structure. People do not understand, and, you know, I have to be honest, a lot of municipalities that I work with, when you use the word tax, you know, there's a hesitancy and really a dubious kind of mentality around, okay, well, who's really going to pay for this? Am I really going to pay for this? Is money coming out of my pocket to pay for something for somebody else? That's not a true public improvement. And here the answer to that is going to be no. The property owners and the people who are getting the benefit of this road, or the primary people who are getting the benefit of the development of this road, are going to be the ones paying for it. And I feel like that is a very, sometimes a difficult message for commissioners and council people to deliver, because the structure is a little complicated. Because what people are going to see is Town of Elkton bonds, or they'll say Town of Elkton Special Taxing District bonds. And, you know, getting the message out and clear that it is not the residents that are going to be responsible for the repayment, except the property owners in that district, is a message that's sometimes proven difficult to give, or to be heard. And it depends on different levels of sophistication. I think there's some sort of apprehension on the part of residents in kind of anything tax, understandably. And so it's communication that's the challenge in my experience that I found. But once it gets in and done, everybody's very happy with the fact that, you know, the town was able to help facilitate something, help bring development and tax base to the town. You know, that benefit is shared by everybody because the tax revenues are going to increase, and the responsibility for the repayment lies with the people who benefited the most. So that's what I've seen. The communication is the biggest challenge. So one of my roles, or I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I think that's good. Tell us what your role is going to be. And
okay, so I would do the documentation. What I like to do and would encourage the town to take me up on this is I would be happy to attend meetings, whether they're in Zoom or in person, however it's working at the time, to be available to answer questions. I also like to work with whoever might be the specific town attorney, because a lot of times they sometimes receive front lines of questions and making sure that at least they understand it sufficiently, because this is a niche area, sufficiently so that they can be responsive to, you know, people who have questions, to educate and to equip all of you with enough of a outline about the process and what this means, so that you can respond to your constituents in a way that is reassuring to them. And then, you know, I really walk you through the process. I don't like these to be rushed. You know, a lot of times towns that maybe like are much more conversant and have issued many more special taxing districts, you know, kind of clip these things through. You know, I think that, you know, sometimes, you know, taking your time with the introduction of the ordinance and the notice and just being very communicative along the process, you know, helps to neutralize some of the angst and apprehension. So you know, one of the things that I try to offer the towns that I work with is, you know, assisting them with that communication. And MuniCap is also very experienced in doing that too, and they, you know, consider that part of their role as well. So I would be responsible for creating the notices, the ordinances, assisting, you know, Lewis and, you know, the town attorney and whomever's involved, the clerk, with the introduction of those, and, you know, and taking them through the process, even though that's not, you know, I typically defer to the town attorney and to the town administrator through that process, but I'm available as a resource and I'm generating the documents. And then depending on how the team is structured, you know, I would be assisting the town in creating the disclosure documents, because these are going to be offered to the market and to bondholders. I don't know if you know this, but Maryland actually usually receives some of the best rates in the country, not just because of your AAA rating, but because it is a relatively higher tax state. It has the benefit of a federal tax exemption, and it has the benefit of the state tax exemption. So a lot of times in these deals, T. Rowe Price, for example, that has a Maryland municipal bond fund, will just snap all of these up because there's such a tax benefit to Maryland bonds in having both the federal and the state tax exemption. So I would be responsible in making sure that the town meets all the requirements so that that tax exemption can be met. I deliver the opinion typically that those bonds are considered tax exempt, and that gets relied upon by the market. I assist with, managing and facilitating the transaction in general. So, I kind of come in, I work with the team. As I understand it, MuniCap has been retained by the developer. I mean, quite frankly, they're the best there is. That's been my experience. And then, as I understand it, they're talking to somebody that would act as an underwriter. I typically like to see an underwriter that's used to these kinds of deals and does a lot of work in Maryland on special taxing district deals, because they know how to work with the municipality and work with the developer and get the right deal into place. And then, hopefully the developer is working with counsel that's experienced with these kinds of taxing districts. And if you have the right players in place, this can go smoothly and in a way that doesn't feel substantial and overwhelming for the town or the commissioners, and doesn't overutilize resources. Like, I take on most of the weight of that, and then I would be coordinating with Lewis and, to the extent necessary, the town attorney in communicating the transaction and facilitating the items that the town would be responsible for in the process of the transaction.
Very good.
Are there any other questions?
Any other questions for Kimberly?
I have a quick one. So this obligation would be created by deed?
So what'll happen is there will be a special taxing assessment that goes onto the real property tax bill, and the special taxing district gets created by ordinance.
Okay, so it's going to be a specific amount for a specific time frame. And how does the potential buyer be notified of that? Or if someone is in a property and stays for 2 years and sells it?
So it's all generated on the tax bill, and I believe that there's a special disclosure that's included in a realtor contract that's related to that. Like, there will be no surprises. And what's convenient about it is because it walks along with the same tax bill. Like, think about it, your mortgage lender, they're going to be collecting for it in their escrow for a typical mortgage for a homeowner resident. Because it's on the tax bill and creates, the sort of same lien priorities and the same consequences for non-payment, you find that, it's no secret, and, the lenders, the mortgage lenders are the ones that end up kind of dealing with it mostly to begin with, and collect it with the escrow, like in a monthly mortgage payment.
Yeah, I get that, but I mean, usually on a realtor sheet, it'll say taxes, and it'll break down maybe town, county, but that's as far as it goes, or it just gives a whole total. Like the yearly taxes are $2,000. It doesn't break down that any part of that is a special assessment. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm
not as familiar with I'm not as familiar with the realtor contract in that regard. I don't know if the other person that was on the phone would have experience with that, but my experience has been that it's communicated during the home sale process and, reflected on the tax bills.
If I can interject, you'll see, yes, there's the total cost of the tax is $2,000 a year, but during the process, there are all these disclosures that they cover everything that has to do with anything with that property. And one of those disclosures would come out and say, you're part of a special taxing district, and this is the price that's going to be placed on this house.
Okay. Do we have a guesstimate on what this typically amounts to in dollars?
For this particular project, as I understand it, what was the range? Around $10 million that MuniCap might have said. They're the ones that will actually, in a granular way, break out the cost. It has to do with what the interest rate is. It has to do with how many years they're going to pay it back over. And then they're going to allocate it to particular parcels of property, as they're planned. And so they're the ones that can give you all of that information. And that is part of the process. And that is information that you will have before the bonds are issued. Because decisions are made.
But how about if we would need that information before we decide to move forward, I would imagine?
Well, remember, there's two steps. There's the creation of the special taxing district, which is the first piece of ordinance that the town will pass. But there's no obligation to pay anything until there are bonds that are issued. And so before the bonds are issued, that is when you will have that information. So for example, if the developer decides that $10 is too much for a house to pay, and they need to make it $8 a year instead, then, they'll find a less expensive way to build that road because they'll borrow $8 million and not $10 million. And I know I'm using very round numbers, but the developer works with MuniCap in order to determine what is an appropriate amount to be paid. And then there's no, like we said, the homeowner was going to pay for this one way or another. Either the developer was going to build the road and the homeowner was going to have to pay for it in the price of their home, or the homeowner gets the benefit of spreading out the cost over a longer period of time, at a lower interest rate, through the use of the special taxing district.
Thank you. Anyone else from the board have any questions or comments for Kimberly?
I would just, Commissioner Piner, just like to thank you, Kimberly. You cleared a few things up for me as far as the time for paying back the bond. The town, I was wondering if the town was going to have to take the burden of that, and you cleared that up for me. The other thing is, it was good to hear how you explained to us how it wouldn't be a surprise to the tenants that are actually getting into this district, the tax district. And third, I see that it kind of made me feel a little bit relieved that the town wouldn't have to take the burden for this. It would be more or less on the developer or the project people that's dealing with this. So thank you very much.
Oh, you are most welcome. And I just want to encourage all of you, this is a lot of information to digest. If questions come up, you can communicate them to Lewis, who can send them to me. You're welcome to email me directly. You'll see that, for me, it's incredibly important when you are acting, really as the custodian for your constituents, that, understanding and having the information available to you to explain to your constituents what's going on, is really important and in the fiduciary exercise of your duties. And so I'm a resource for that.
Kimberly, I want to add that whenever a board member has a question, they send it to me, and then I would send it to you and copy the rest of the board. And then the response comes back to everyone, so everyone's always in the loop. That's we pride ourselves on communication with all the members that are elected to office in this government. So that's how it works.
And really, I mean, you're the front lines in thinking of the questions and the information that's going to be important to your constituents. Sometimes I've even seen a FAQ like a frequently asked questions, or, you know, we can even create a reference sheet, you know, that kind of helps maintain a consistent, because consistency is always important, a consistent way to answer some of the questions that we know are going to come up.
That would be nice. Yes, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, of course.
Very informative.
Thank you so
very
much.
well spoken.
Kimberly, thank you
very
so much
Kimberly.
for coming on board.
Thank you.
Oh,
Kimberly.
it's my pleasure.
Thank
I'm
you.
really honored to be working with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, guys.
All right.
Thank you. Next on the
I'm going to hop off, okay?
okay.
Yeah,
Sound
thanks, Kimberly.
Bye.
You need anything, you let me know. Ask Lewis. I answer email all the time.
All right.
Okay.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Okay, next on the agenda, we have the introduction with Cecil Solidarity. I think Pastor Brown is on. I just saw he was unmuting, and I wanted to let everyone know before we move any further, I'd like for you all to join me. I'm going to swear myself in as the new chief of police today. So now listen, the floor is yours. I think I'd like to thank everyone for participating. I know that was a little long-winded, but it's probably one of the most important projects, we have financially going with the town. It's anywhere from a $700 million to almost $1 billion project, the Southfields project, which will mean a lot of tax revenue, a new community for the town of Elkton, and it's very important for us to understand some of those financial side of things. But Pastor Brown, if you want to take the lead on this, you had called me about 7 or 10 days ago, and I know Cecil Solidarity was already scheduled to be onto the agenda. And I know that you wanted to discuss a little bit about the hiring process, I believe, for the chief of police.
Yes, sir. Thank you, and I appreciate you, Mr. Mayor, and the commissioners and the town for giving us this platform and allowing us as community leaders to share our sentiment in reference to such an important topic as the hiring of a chief of police. We know across the country that the law enforcement, morale in law enforcement is very low, and there is no confidence in policing. That is across the country. It's a known fact, and I believe that the town of Elkton is at a moment where we can effectively bring the community and law enforcement together. But as Congressman John Lewis said, we have to get in good trouble, necessary trouble. We have to do the right thing, the righteous thing. And so we have with us, Mr. Mayor and commissioners, representatives from Cecil Solidarity. We have Evangelist Murray, who is the president of the Cecil County branch of the NAACP. And I represent the faith community, the 14 churches that represent GEMA, the Greater Elkton Ministerial Alliance, and a lot of our community. And so with that, I'm going to turn this over to Christine Givens. We have all met and we have one purpose and one vision. And so she will share our ask, and we can go from there.
Thank you, Reverend Brown. I appreciate it. So just to start, again, my name is Christine Givens, and we thank you for allowing us to have this opportunity to have this discussion today. So to start, we are all aware, obviously, that Police Chief Matt Donnelly is going to be retiring. I believe it said in the newspaper on August 31st, and that there's currently an active search that's taking place for the new chief police for the Elkton Police Department. We know that this active search is critical to the growth and sustainability of this department, and we know that it's also very important to our town and the community at large. So as the article that appeared in the paper earlier today about Chief Chief Donnelly's departure stated, a police chief cannot serve in a vacuum because law enforcement efforts have an impact on local businesses, community events, town residents, and other facets of the municipality. So therefore, we are here as a unified group today to represent the voices of the town of Elkton that we have all spoken to within our own organizations, and also discuss ways that we can collaborate with you all to ensure that as leaders of our town, that this process will be the will of the people, in other words, the community's voice. It will include the community's voice, and that the search be comprehensive, diverse, and collaborative. So to do this, we are asking and discussing today 5 things that we would like to take place. So number 1, we would like that Mayor Alt and the commissioners call forth a diversified search committee made up of community leaders to be a part of the hiring process. This includes having our qualified leaders that are on this call today, especially Reverend Brown, who is a former police officer, being part of the selection committee and helping develop instruments for questioning candidates. We know that it's within your power to do this based on section C6-1, item 16, that indicates that you are able to create offices or assign additional functions or duties to offices, departments, or agencies. The second thing is that at minimum, we are requiring a statewide search to be conducted, which allows the selection committee that we mentioned above to compare the best candidates. As it states currently right now in the EPD policy manual in chapter 4, section 3, the town of Elkton is seeking to achieve a ration of minority group employees representative of the community, and will actively participate in affirmative action and equal employment opportunity plans to seek qualified minority applicants. So this means for us that the current recruitment efforts that right now that we've seen that have limited vacancy announcements just to local news outlets like the Cecil Whig or the Aegis or the town's website are simply not enough to help garner a diverse group because it has a limited reach. Those outlets and those channels are not sufficient to be able to garner that global or that wider nationwide reach of viable candidates that can come and help take that vacancy. In addition to that, the third thing that we're asking is that we integrate more better inclusive language in hiring, the actual hiring announcement. I was looking, we had a meeting last week, the 4 of us, and we also were looking last night just to see if the language had been updated. Because this needs to be done to help maximize a diverse candidate pool. Specifically, we're asking that there be an additional statement added, such as we recognize that diverse teams make the strongest teams, and we encourage people from all backgrounds to apply. Studies have shown that applicants from other demographic groups are less likely to apply for jobs without a strong equal opportunity statement. And it's imperative that the integrity of this search showcase that we are serious about bringing in a diverse pool of candidates for an opportunity to help lead our police department. In addition to that, we also have our 4th ask, and that's to be open-minded to national best practices in relation to hire an agency head. The next is that we want to keep the community of Elkton informed. We all know that as representatives of our leadership team at Elkton, the Elkton municipal representatives, that you essentially serve the people. And we want to make sure, and you're committed to doing what you say you're going to do in your policy and your documents in the charter, where it states that the town administrator has the duty to inform the public concerning plans and activities of the Board of Commissioners and the town administration. So that for us is the same equivalent as this police chief selection is being done by that group. So we're asking and requiring that the Cecil County, the Elkton town community is noted of what's happening on the ongoing process. So where are you at with the search committee? Who are the people that you have coming in, and what what is the sort of the timeline moving forward to help bring people in for interviews? And then what is the timeline after that to be able to select a viable candidate? So with that said, I am not alone in this, as I said before, and as Pastor Brown mentioned earlier. I thank you for your time for my part of it, but I also will now kick it over to our partners, my fellow board member, Tim Rothamel, as well as Reverend Brown and or Evangelist Ezzie Murray.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, for right now, I think just kind of leave it picking up where Christine left off at the end there is we would like to hear, kind of initial thoughts, especially from Mr. George, since I know you're probably the one heading up the search committee right now to bring in a police chief as it's specifically under your powers in the town charter. So was hoping that you could give us some updates on willingness to expand the search or share what the obstacles have been thus far from doing so, and also kind of what the timeline looks like right now.
I know it was mentioned that we had the advertisement for the chief and the wig and the aegis and on our website, but we've expanded also to the Maryland Municipal League and LinkedIn and things of that nature. And I probably have about 12 applications so far, some of which are really experienced people in a command level police department. So I have some really good candidates now. So I don't know, but we haven't closed the opportunity for more candidates to date.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. And
there's 157 municipalities in Maryland. So when it's advertised in the MML, it goes out to every community that's in the Maryland Municipal League in the state of Maryland. So it's statewide. It's not just the Cecil County and Hartford County area. So it's pretty extensive.
Makes sense. And as you're sending it out there, are you amenable to adding in that language where, women and minority candidates are strongly encouraged to apply as well?
Because the original advertisement, I don't have it in front of me, was to ask for a man or a woman. We're not, I think this is my original language.
Yeah, for that. But I would say in the language, I would also add minority candidates as well.
Well, I'm not sure what minority candidates you want included.
I would say that. Well,
we don't differentiate between who applies. We don't say who's a minority and who isn't. I mean, I don't discriminate in any manner or form.
No, I wouldn't say that you are. I'm saying that was suggested. Somebody in our group, Ms. Murray, who has years and years of HR experience, and actually strongly suggested that be added into the language. So that came from the NAACP head locally that wanted to add in that language. So, I mean, I don't think it's too much to ask to add it in for that. So
I don't object to adding any language that the mayor and commissioners feel is suitable. I just, since we've already had this ad out to so many different locations, I'm not sure how to change it at this point. That's my only reluctance, because it's already out and people have it. So it's not like I'm starting from scratch. It's already out,
Makes sense. Just as far as future postings, if you guys do see fit to add into a wider net, Reverend Brown, I know you referenced like the Police One database would be a good place to add it in. Possibly, the Baltimore Sun to cast a wider net statewide as well, places like that. So if and when it does expand, adding in the language of women and minority candidates being strongly encouraged to apply would go a long way as far as, asks from the community coming forward.
Lou, I don't have a problem with that at all. So as we move forward, we can add that information. But just to touch on what Lewis had stated, the information has gone out to every municipality in the state of Maryland. So statewide, I can promise you it's in every county, every police department, every areas that it needs to be touched through that 157 municipalities it's touching people right now. But we'd be more than happy to change that language.
Awesome.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor and Mr. George, because if out of those 12 applicants that you already have, there are no minorities, what that is telling us is that the language in the announcement is not attracting minorities, is not attracting a diverse group. Now, and I do know that there is one African-American who has applied. I know that personally for this position. But if there are 11 other white officers who have applied, then this announcement is not reaching, it's not diverse.
How do you know what race the other candidates are. We don't ask that I've never seen these people, and there's no criteria to say what race they're in. I mean, I don't even know that. I just know a name, address, and then I get a complete resume and letter of interest. But it doesn't identify them by race or color or anything else.
Well,
how do you know that they're not black people? Or
right, I do understand
else?
when those applications come in, you don't know who they are. What I'm saying is that so that we catch a diverse pool, we need to make sure that, I mean, let's be real clear. Cecil County has a history of racism. Cecil County has a history of racism. And so
I would comment that Louis George is from Cecil County, and I don't have a history of racism. And I spent 14 years on a police department and never expect any adverse service to any racial entity within this town or community.
Well, I'm not talking about I'm not talking about individuals. I'm talking about the Cecil County has a history of racism and racist practices. I'm not talking about an individual. And so when a job announcement goes out to about law enforcement, and African Americans are looking at the job announcement from Cecil County, if it doesn't mention diversity, black people and people of color may not apply for the position just based upon history. Now let's be real clear. Let's be honest. When I came to Cecil County 7 years ago, there were no African Americans on the police department, and we're only talking about 7 years ago. There were no African American police officers. I approached Matt Donnelly myself and talked to him about minority hiring, because there were none 7 years ago. So we're not talking about 30 years ago. We're only talking about 7 years ago. And so when we look at the population of Elkton, and with only 2 African American police officers, that doesn't match the population that we have. And so the police department has to do a better job in diversity and inclusion. And in order to do that, we have to make sure that our announcements that go out speak to diversity and speak to inclusiveness. We have to make sure of that language.
Reverend Brown, this is Commissioner Piner.
Yes, sir.
With all due respect, I mean, I've been I served on the board for 16 years, and some of these facts that you've just stated are not completely clear. Now, I'm not trying to get in the debate with nobody. You have the right to your own opinion, but as far as I've been on the board, I can speak for myself. I look and I see, I've been on the school board, I've been at Cecil College, I've been with the town of Elkton, I've been involved with many recreational programs. Now, I can say myself that from what you're asking us to do right now, Cecil College has never went out and said, I want to hire someone just because they're black. I'm not saying that's what you're saying, or just because they're white. There's a fine line that you have to draw when you go to recruit or to actually go and hire somebody, because either way you look at it, black, white, Hispanic, whatever, it comes down to discrimination when you go to hire somebody because of their race. It's the same with religion. Now, again, I'm trying to be as straight and honest with you. I'm not trying to be smart. I'm not trying to be someone sitting up on a pedestal. But when it comes down to our community, which is the town of Elkton, I've got family members, kids, grandkids, aunts, uncles, that I look forward that this town has to become a better place. And yeah, I support Black Lives Matter. I do support that. I'm not against that. I'm not against any of the petitions and all that stuff. But the thing is, what bothers me right today is serving and being a 63-year-old person from town of Elkton. I have not ever experienced having to go out and say, I got to hire somebody because of their race or their religion. That is something I'm really against. So, I mean, I'm just saying, everything that you guys are speaking, I enjoy listening to people's point of view. It comes down, and I know this is off the subject, but please take this respectfully. This is my opinion. It comes down to when we go to the voting polls. I got to tell people who I voted for, and then after I tell them who I voted for, then they hate me because I voted for someone. That used to be a privilege of mine, a privilege of a citizen, or whether or not you're Republican or Democrat. The thing is, we've got to either deal with issues and not parties. And I'm just going to leave on that because it's a touchy situation with me. And I will speak on behalf of the blacks in the community because I am black. I said this, and I will say it again. I was born black, and I'm going to die black. And there's no way there's somebody going to change that. And that will be a fact to me. All right, that's all I'm going to say. I'm not trying to get smart and nothing, but I just have to get that off my conscience.
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
so
Thank you.
go ahead, Pastor Brown.
To be real clear, we're not asking for a black candidate. We're not asking for a green candidate or a red candidate. The letter that was sent to the mayor and to the town administrator and to the commissioners said we want to make sure that the process is collaborative and diverse. I don't care if the candidate, if the police chief is white. I don't care. What I do care is that the best candidate comes forth, that we're able to get the best candidate. And you can't get the best candidate if one person picks that candidate, because bias is always, all of us have biases. All of us do. All right. And so you cannot get the best. It has to be a collaborative effort because the chief of police has so much power and authority, it will impact the community in which that person serves. And so in order for, and I think it's a good job as policing changes all across the country, is to involve the community that this person is to serve, to involve the community. And so our ask is not about black and white. It's just making sure that the process of hiring someone has integrity and is collaborative. My letter never said color, race, nationality. It's talking about a collaborative process.
Reverend Brown, I appreciate you, and I really do, because you've been inspiration for the town, and you've been a good speaker when it comes down to talking about things we need to do to come together as a community, and I do appreciate that. I really mean that. But when it comes down to hiring a police officer, I can pick 3 people out of the community and tell them to stand here and pick a police officer, but a police chief. But the requirements that are demanded by the police chief or the requirements that they have to follow through the process of hiring a police officer, I have no clue of what's in the background that you have to search and bring forth to bring the best candidate. And when I say that, the best candidate would be chosen from the outline that is set in the bylaws or whatever you call them, or the laws by the police officer, the police chief, in order to hire someone. What I'm saying is, I can't hire somebody in a legal field if I don't have no legal background or any kind of information that I have to hire those people by. The same way with the police department. There's a system that we have to hire these people. And yes, the 3 or 5 candidates that would be the best will come towards us as the board or to the board for recommendation. So it's not he's hiring or she's hiring by themselves. The human resource, when they hire somebody for the town, we don't know anything about their requirements, their background check, or what they did in the past, and whether they made it through the final test. We don't have all that. So with all due respect, I don't have that knowledge. So please trust me on this. I don't have that knowledge. You, as an ex-police officer, you have some knowledge or maybe all the knowledge. And I respect that. So that's what I'm saying to you. So please take that as a positive statement from me.
Hey, Lou.
May I just interject really quick? Commissioner Piner, thank you for your comments and your feedback. I think that it's difficult to have these conversations sometimes because of the fact that we've always done what we've always done, and we want to kind of stay in our comfort zones. But what we're asking is that we just follow the policy that is stated out there. So we're asking that we follow the affirmative action pieces that are communicated in the policy currently. We're asking for transparency of the process. We're asking for inclusion of the process if we are going to follow the mantra of creating a community policing force that is serving the community and also is connecting and partnering with the community. And in addition to that, as a person that's been in Cecil County my whole life, it's time to do things a little bit different than what we've done before. There's no reason why we only just had Black police officers when Elkton has the majority of the Black population in the county 7 years ago. And we're committed, and we should all be committed, and I think we all are committed to doing better than we've done before, and making sure that when I'm raising my children, and I'm very close with your family as well, and our children are growing up in this, and your grandchildren and my children are growing up together in this area, that if they choose to stay here, when they get here, they can aspire to see someone that's representative of what the community looks like, and even so far as what they look like. And it's not, again, like Pastor Brown said, it is not a matter of having a Black person or a Hispanic person or whatever in there, and we're not asking for that specifically. What we're saying is that whomever becomes the chief of police should have a diverse background, period. And the diverse background also means that they've governed or they've led police officers or they've policed in diverse communities, not just white communities, not just Black communities, but a diverse group of communities, so they know how to interact and the importance of interacting with other people that don't look like them. And right now, with the stories that we've been collecting, there is a clear indication that there are lots of things that are not taking place, that people are not ready or available to be able to police in a community that is changing. The demographic here is changing drastically as we go along in Cecil County. And as we build, we just had a conversation about a new project. As that project comes to fruition and other people from military or whatever come here, we want to be able to say that we've done whatever that we can do to make sure that people are safe, but they are safe in the arms or in the mindset of having a police force that's designed to protect and serve, be as diverse and as inclusive as possible. And I think that that's what it is. So again, we want to make sure that it's understood that we're not asking for a Black man or a Hispanic man or a Black woman or Hispanic woman or any other races or demographics. We're asking that the search be inclusive, the search be diverse, and that the people that are making the decisions, it's not just down to one person to make the decision, but it's an inclusive community decision with our input on behalf of the people that you serve.
Thank you on that. Lou, can you just let everyone on the meeting understand how the process, I know how I feel pretty comfortable to know how the process is working, but can you enlighten everyone on the meeting how the process of hiring a chief is going to work?
Well, currently, absent the statement that they're requesting, I've got probably about 12 applicants, maybe more, I'm trying to think. And they give us a letter of interest because I'm kind of interested in why they want to be a chief of police in the town of Elkton, frankly. Why do they want to be here? Because some of them are from very distant places, not Maryland, but outside of Maryland. And then I want a resume that gives me the experience that they have in law enforcement, particularly in command level, rather than a patrolman or something of that nature that would have no knowledge whatsoever intricately of the law enforcement officer's bill of rights or command procedures or training and leading men or whatever. And a couple of the applicants, and one in particular that impressed me the most was a man that had worked for the federal government and a DEA for many years, and his emphasis was on the importance of leadership, how important leadership was to his position as a DEA agent or as command in a command level position or a management level position, and how important leadership is in terms of any group of organization, whether it's the police or otherwise, but he was emphasis in law enforcement. And the fact that leadership is the factor that I would look for. Leadership is what it needs to be. If you want diversity and inclusiveness, you basically have to have leadership in a police department, because everybody is targeting the chief of police here. There's 40 men out there roughly serving the town of Elkton, and every one of those 40 men and women have to be attuned to the needs of this community and not to be racist or anything else. And we can't target just one person, because the person that becomes the chief of police is a leader, has to provide the leadership, has to provide the guidance to other officers. But I can tell you, when they get in a patrol car and go out and go to work and start serving the citizens, I don't care if it's a criminal investigation or a traffic or whatever, they are an individual person acting with the background and training and experience that they have at that point in time when they interface with a citizen. So that's the important thing. I'm not just looking at a chief of police. I'm looking for a leadership person that can inspire and give proper guidance to 40 men and women who serve this community. Well, I never even thought twice about what color they were. I don't even look at what their background is and experience. Frankly,
I think the question where I wanted to get to, Lou, was, and I'm going to actually ask Commissioner Givens this question with you. Commissioner Givens has been on the board now 30 years, and he's seen.
I haven't been there 30.
You're getting close. You're getting close. So I know that we've hired probably 7 or 8 police chiefs during these times. How many of those hires were you not involved in?
You know, as I think back, we have had multiple ways in which we have hired a police chief. And I think Christine Givens, my daughter-in-law, you bring up a valid point, but you know, it depends upon which way the town is going to go under the mayor's leadership and the other commissioners, because the life is changing. But during my time on the board, I have seen where there was a search committee, we hired a chief. There were times when Louis George has hired the chief. There were times when we had the opportunity to vet the chief. And then there were other opportunities when someone within the rank was promoted up. So the charter apparently states that the town commissioner, that the administrator has the right to do that. And at this time, we have to support that. And I can understand where Reverend Brown has some doubts about one person doing it as well. But I think in the instance going forward, as the mayor has suggested, that when we hire a chief this time, that we will have some participation in that hire, not taking away what Louis George's responsibility is, because he's going to be the final say-so in that. Also, and Commissioner Planner can tell you as well, and we've had a number of people in human resources, I've always asked about diversity. And, you know, it has been very difficult in trying to get, well, African-American, Hispanics, or other people to come this way. And so maybe that's another jurisdiction we need to look at as the mayor and commissioner as well. We have had numerous African-Americans on the public work department, something I had pushed for. We got them there and, you know, they left. So you also, if you look, you'll find that there's very little there, as well as other departments. So, you know, I don't think it's so far-fetched that we can't come up with some type of working relationship with human resources and the other components of the town of Elkton to have some diversity there, because certainly, we expect it, and, we'll do whatever that is necessary to have that done.
Hi, this is Evangelist Murray. We've had some excellent dialogues, and I do again appreciate the opportunity to speak. The concern that I have is when we keep talking about diversity and inclusion, we keep coming back to race, and that is not what we're trying to communicate our voice of concern. Also, I have written affirmative action plans. I have responsibility in my current job for affirmative action. And I did make the request to add that verbiage to the advertisement that we have. When we ask for or say that we encourage minority candidates and or if you want to put women in there to apply, what that does is it opens up a new view of how someone will see your job ad. So I did go to the website that you mentioned because I'm from Maryland. I did live in Atlanta for 20 years. I came back, went to school in Cecil County, and wasn't aware of the Maryland Municipal League. I went to it. The ad is it doesn't say very much, but it gives the link to the Elkton website. When you go there, it says Elkton police officer. It doesn't say chief of police. It just says police officer. And then when you click the link, it takes you to the police officer advertisement. It doesn't take you to the advertisement for the chief of police. So the only thing we're asking is if when you put that in there and you open it up to other avenues of advertising, you have a greater chance of getting more diverse candidates. If you have an affirmative action plan, most affirmative action plans say you must show evidence of doing something to encourage the activity of diverse candidates in your activity of recruitment. It also says that your people that work in your area should mirror your community. I struggle with that with what I'm doing right now in one position that I have because it's in a Hispanic community, but I don't have that group of people. So I have to do things in areas in which they may see my advertisements to get that group of candidates. So that is some of the things that we need to take into consideration, and then we need to move forward. And lastly, what I would like to say, because I'm actually late for another meeting, is that I live it every day when I go throughout the state and represent Cecil County. Cecil County, whether it is legitimate or not, still in 2020 has a reputation of being racist. Period. It's a fact. I get it. When we have things at the branch, we can't get, other people won't come because they think this county is racist. And it is what it is. And until we change it, there's nothing we can do about it. So that is why we're communicating what we're communicating. If we're thinking that we continue to do the same thing that we're doing and we're going to get diverse candidates, it is not the case.
Mr. Mayor, I don't want to belabor the point, but what I do want to say is, and Mr. Givens, Brother Givens was on the phone call. A church, Elkton Presbyterian Church, reached out to Wrights AME Church last week because they wanted to engage with us a courageous conversation about systemic racism and injustice. They reached out to us. We did not reach out to them. They called us. And it was surprising, Mr. Mayor, to hear some of those members, and Elkton Presbyterian Church is predominantly white. It was surprising to hear how they saw racism in Elkton and racism in the world. Unfortunately, we live in a time where systemic racism and implicit bias is real. It's real. About 5 years ago, I was stopped by Elkton police officers My best friend had hit a deer. We were coming from Bible study. My best friend had hit a deer on 279. We called the police, dialed 911, and we called the police. And the two officers who pulled up were white. One was an Elkton police officer, and one was from the sheriff's department. And the first thing they said to me and to my friend was, where were we coming from? Now, I know Mr. Lewis was in the department for 15 years. I was in the department for 22 years. We both know that the first thing that you do when you pull up on a scene is either render aid or ask someone, are they okay? Or do they need medical attention? These two officers did not ask if we needed medical attention. And I'm only talking about 5 years ago. When Mr. Givens pulled up on the scene, he shared with one of the officers that I was his pastor and a retired officer. And at that time, their language changed. So instead of seeing me as the enemy or seeing me as a threat, now they engaged in conversation with me because they knew that I was a retired police officer. And so what I'm saying is that these problems are systemic. They're all around the country, all around the world. I believe that Elkton, town of Elkton, can do good for its community by simply saying, we want to make our process, have this process with integrity, and we want to make this collaborative because we're looking out for the best interests of our community. One of the things that Mr. Lewis George did say was about leadership. And so he's strong on leadership. And leadership is important. But I believe that there are other qualities and skills because you can have a racist leader. There are other qualities and skills that make up a top cop and makes that up. And so if his focus is on leadership, I believe if the process is collaborative, some others may focus on someone who has diversity, someone who and other skill sets. And so that's what makes the process, that's what helps us to get the best candidate, is not just to look at it through the lens of one person, but to look at it through the lens of all.
Thank you, Pastor Brown. I will make this commitment, listening to this, that the point that I wanted to get out, my intent was that the 5 board members would be the committee. And with us being that committee to guide with Lou over the applicants, he does do that. And I want to make it very clear. I know that he doesn't really get into it the direction I wanted him to, but the bottom line is he will not hire that chief of police without the blessing of the 5 council people. And I can assure you that we will make sure that we have someone unanimously. I want to make sure that we're all unanimous on the decision when we pick that police officer, chief of police. I can comment to you that I feel extremely comfortable that the people, the 17,000 people that elected Commissioner Massimiano, Commissioner Broomall, Commissioner Givens, Commissioner Piner, and of course myself, I think that we could represent our town very well during this process. And I know that you have my ear. I know you have other commissioners' ears, and I can promise you, a heartfelt promise, that we will be very, the process will be very, very fair. I can promise you that.
How do you feel about making it transparent where you supply sort of updates if things are going on, or maybe even make the community able to sit in on those meetings as you're going back and forth, because it is a very public position. As both Christine and Reverend Brown and Evangelist Murray have said, the chief of police has a whole lot of power over who carries a badge and a gun and can take away people's rights in our community. And that second part of the phrase, protect and serve, they do serve the public. So I think it would go a long way in helping the process just have a better perception going forward. If we could orchestrate something, I know Commissioner Givens mentioned that there was a search committee in the past. If at least there would be members of the community that could partner with the commissioners in the search process, or some sort of measure of transparency as the process is going along.
I want to mention something here too, so you'll know about this. The only person other than the board that's more powerful than the chief of police is the town administrator. If the chief of police did anything in this community that did not represent the best interests of the mayor and commissioners and community, I would terminate their position immediately. And I have that authority to do so. And I'm willing to go to federal court if necessary, because I've been there before. So it's not like this man has unbridled power over anybody. He actually serves under the town administrator, who serves under the mayor and commissioner of the town of Elkton.
Oh, I'm aware.
I can
just
tell you
wanna
right
make
now,
sure
I have fired people
up in that situation. You know,
Uh-huh.
like we'll have the hiring process where we vet somebody that everybody's on board with from the community as well as the elected officials. Because I don't want you to be in a position to do that.
I don't hire a chief under contract. I hire them as a serve at the pleasure. So that means they have no recourse under a contract to stay in office. They either accept that that type of hiring, or they don't work here. So that gives me an avenue to terminate any chief that doesn't serve the best interest, as I said, of the mayor and commissioners and the people of this community. So you can rest assured that there's no powerful racist chief that's going to be out there doing anything.
I'd feel more rest assured if there was transparency committed to in the process leading up to it, to be honest.
Now, can I ask this question? Will there be, and maybe you can answer it and maybe you can't, will there be a residency requirement for Cecil County? As we know, Matt Donnelly didn't live in Cecil County, and like you, Mr. George, don't live in Cecil County, and so those tax dollars are going outside of the county. Will there be a requirement for the chief of police to be a resident of Cecil County at all?
Not at this point, no. The reason I say that, I have a candidate from Hartford County, and I have another candidate from Delaware, close by, actually a lot closer than I live to the town of Elkton, that are really good candidates. And I'm not saying I'm choosing them, but I'm just saying I wouldn't require them to sell their home and move here to serve for that position. Now, we have other candidates that are over 1,000 miles away, and obviously they're going to have to move here, and they're not going to communicate back and forth to work from 1,000 miles away. So there's a commonsensical approach to where they're going to live. But I'm more interested in how they serve than where they live.
But one of the problems that we're facing in law enforcement is that it's the officers who serve the community don't live in the community, which is creating that implicit bias. And so if you have a chief of police who doesn't live in Cecil County or live close to Cecil County or in the community, how then are they able to understand the dynamics of the community that they do not live in? That's one of the major problems that law enforcement is facing across the country. When I joined the police department many, many years ago, that is what we were looking at then. And we created programs so that officers could purchase homes in the community. In Baltimore City, it is a requirement that its top cop lives in Baltimore City itself, because it's important. I mean, we are, the chief of police must lead by example. And so I believe it's just important that that person either lives in Cecil County or is a resident of the town of Elkton. And I think that is important. we've got to move to the next level. We cannot continue to do business as usual and think that that the needle has to move, and we have to begin to break these trends that have entrenched our the way we do our business. And that's just my personal assessment.
Reverend Brown, again, this here would then hinder our search for a police chief, because then we would then limit people from, they would have to move to Cecil County. Seeing that automatically comes up, they would then not even want to put an application in. I mean, there's a two-way sword on this one.
But that would show, Mr. Piner, that would show their commitment. That would show a person's commitment. If they applied for this job and had to change the residence, that would show their commitment. The same commitment, and Mr. Givens can tell you, I pastor in Elkton, I lead the members in Elkton, but I live in Randallstown. But I've been searching for a home in Cecil County. That shows my commitment to the county. All right. And so when we talk about a top cop and someone who says, and that's what Mr. Lewis said, Mr. George said, that he wants to know why you want to police in Elkton. That's one of his top questions. Why you want to police in Elkton? All right. Well, I want to live in Elkton. I want to raise my family in Elkton. And I want to make sure that the Elkton community thrives and survives. And so that is part of the commitment process, that I'm willing to move to the place that I'm about to serve. Wouldn't you want someone who says, you know what, I will move to Elkton? That shows commitment. And, I know it may stretch the process, but I would rather have someone who lives in Cecil County or live in Elkton to police me than someone who's in New Jersey, someone in Pennsylvania. This person knows the dynamics of the community. The people are able to see that person more readily in the community versus someone who lives outside of our community.
Thank you, Reverend Brown.
And the precedent's already set. There's residency requirements if somebody wants to be, mayor or a town commissioner or something like that. And if the police chief is going to take that spot in the community, it just makes sense.
So your thinking is that all department heads, real quickly, all department heads, from your town planner to your finance director to public works department, your assistants, should all employees live in the town of Elkton? I'd just like to get some input.
No, I would say the employees that are responsible for the image they have in their mind is how they're going to police. You know what I mean? So if you're kind of just coming in and out, you only deal with the worst parts of the community at any given time. So you have a certain perception about how the policing trickles down from there. And that's, if we had Dr. Heather on here, she would walk you through that. But having somebody that lives here, that walks to Walmart, that, has their kids playing Little League and everything, it's a much deeper investment in caring and serving the people in the community. And I think it's a great requirement to have, because like Reverend Brown was saying, it speaks to the commitment they have to building up the community right now. And it also speaks to the perception that they will have when they're working in and around it. So while it might stress, it's, I think, a very important thing to add.
Right. And if we talk about just in general, and I don't want to keep harping on this, but we talk about just in general, the optics of what it looks like. And then also on top of that, we had the discussion about sort of what did that community policing piece of it look like? If they're not here, and if they're not invested in here, why would they want to come to, they feel obligated to go to these things. They're not, I like to see Officer Brown in public when I see him. I know him, I know he lives here, I see him, that's a good thing. And when you're leading, back to what Reverend Brown said, you're leading by example. If you're here, you have a vested interest in where you live, because you also wanted to make sure that it's safe for your children and your family and people that you love and you care about to come with. And not to say that a police chief doesn't do that naturally, but you're more inclined to do that when you feel invested in your area. It's just like if you compare a renter to a homeowner, the renter will, for the most part, be fine in the house, in the home, and do whatever they need to do to maintain the home. But an owner takes ownership in the home and makes sure that that home is cared for and taken care of, and that they do the repairs and they do all the things necessary to make sure that if they have people coming in and out, that that home is representative of the things that they believe and they cherish. So I think we're hopefully trying to get to a point where we want to make sure that there is a civilian type of board with qualified people from the community as a part of that selection process. And then on top of that, if we can commit today to doing a special town hall series or something, special communication, and we can work with you. I mean, I've got the skills and resources to be able to do that as well. And I offered that to one of the lieutenants when we had a meeting with Chief Donnelly and some of the lieutenants a few weeks ago, that we can make sure that that communication and those things are being communicated in a clear and easy way. And we will share the heck out of it on our channels as well, just to make sure that people in their community that are interested in this and that are invested in this process know what's going on and what's happening. And that's what we're asking.
Thank you so much. Well, we'll certainly, we heard you loud and clear today. I certainly took a lot of notes here, and I'm sure the board did. And we can report back to you with what we come up with. I know that I want to discuss this with the board. We got to have some discussions with our town attorney, the town administrator. There's things that are touching here, these HR issues that are above my pay grade, that I don't know exactly how we move forward with those things. But listen, you certainly had our ear today. We listened, and we know there's room for improvement. We know that we can improve. We know we can be better, and we're going to do everything that we can to continue to get better. And we are very appreciative of you bringing some very valid points to this board and to our community, and we thank you for what you do. Thank you.
I like to make a comment that I wholeheartedly agree with the affirmative action statement that should be in this ad. I think that's very, very important to emphasize that we do have diversity and inclusion involved. The question the issue I have now, and I do understand the position that there are people in the community that would feel more comfortable having a chief of police actually live in the community they serve. But if the board makes a decision that that's a valid criteria, I'm going to have to start over again in a sense, because the candidates I've received received information from are unaware that that's a requirement here. So basically, I'm not saying we shouldn't start over again. I'm saying, but I would probably have to do that because that's not part of the criteria. But the affirmative action thing I can put in there, and we'll see what we can do there. I don't think that'll change anything, but residency is an issue for some people, especially if they have established homes, somewhere. That's a big move. The advantage we have is we're going to have a big development with a lot of residential homes before too long, but that might be a couple years away. And I think we want to chief before Southfields is developed.
Hey, they might want to live there. Who knows?
Thank
Well,
you.
I want to, Mr. Mann, and
Yes.
on behalf of our team, I wholeheartedly want to thank you and the commissioners, Mr. George, and all of you for taking of your time to hear us. This process is the start of, I think, many opportunities for us to move the needle in Elkton and to work collaboratively together. Wrights Church just joined the Cecil County Chamber of Commerce, and I was in their meeting on yesterday, and it shows how we continue to network and to push each other for a better community. And so I really am grateful, as Louis George always says at the end of his letters, he's about team, and I'm about team too. So let's work together Let's pull our talent together, our giftings together, because it is a team that makes the dream work, not an individual, but a team that makes it. And so you as commissioners and the town administrator, you're operating as a team. All I ask you to do is let us help you. Let us help you. Most of us work in Cecil County. We live in Cecil County, and I know you are elected officials, but we still also have skin in the game, and we want to help you so that we can help our community as well. And so I really thank you for your time and all that you do. We appreciate all that you are doing. Cecil County is a wonderful county. All counties and all municipalities have their issues. But one thing I can say about Cecil County is that you have a heart and passion for your constituents and the people that you serve. And I greatly appreciate that. I'm not saying that tongue in cheek. I've worked closely with all of you, and you're about action and talking the talk. And so I'm grateful.
Reverend Brown, Earl Piner again. I appreciate you guys sharing your viewpoints with us. Christina, Tim, and Ezzy, I appreciate your comments, and I'll take them to heart. What you said today, and a couple of things did hit home and opened my eyes to a couple of your statements, and I appreciate you.
Appreciate you guys.
So this is Bridget.
Thank you.
Can I jump in just for a quick second? I'm not on the board, but I am with Cecil Solidarity. I wanted to thank Michelle for helping me get everything set up. It was a little tricky to get on the agenda. So from like a logistical perspective, we talked about, next steps. What does that mechanism look like? Is that something you guys handle and are just going to be reaching out behind the scenes, or is that something that needs to be facilitated on the books when we're talking about timelines?
Well, I would say that we're digesting everything that was brought here today. I know that each of us, the commissioners and myself, will have a discussion with Lewis, probably one-on-one, and then our message will be sent out by Lewis, and it will be a team joint effort. So we'll make sure, Bridget, you get that information on how we're moving forward. But I know that Lewis is probably going to move forward with changing the language immediately, because it sounded like that was, I know he knows how to read between the lines with the knowing who's with him on the council. So I know that he's changing that pretty quickly. And listen, I think our applications are open for the chief of police through September, or until we find the right candidate. There's not going to be a deadline that we put on anything. Quite frankly, we're going to find the right person. We want the right person that we all can agree on, and it's going to do the best for the town of Elkton. And we're looking forward to that. So I know that didn't really answer your question, but that's the best I could give you right now.
That's a great start. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Everybody, thank you so much for being here.
Before we leave, didn't want to go away completely silent on all this. I hear what everybody's saying, and I appreciate both sides. I have the ability to really see things from all sides. I want to say I have no problem with changing the language on the application. I do believe that had we thought of it prior to sending it out, it would have been on there anyway. I don't want anybody to take this the wrong way, but I didn't think that we needed to send out a special invitation. I mean, obviously it's open to anybody who wants to apply. As far as the diversity of our police department, I truly don't know. So I'd have to ask the question, how many applicants do we have from diverse cultures that don't make it? Do we have a lot of people trying to apply that don't make it?
To answer a question like that, the first step in applying for a police officer job in Elkton is this written test. And I think somewhere in that, Joe Zarillo is probably in there somewhere. And after that written test, if they pass that test, then they go into the next stage. But probably one of the most, the background investigation that they do on every candidate usually has a lot to say about whether that candidate ever gets to the next step in the hiring process, because they give them quite a bit of, it takes quite a bit of time and effort to do a background on any officer who applies. And I can tell you right now, they found things out about people that was never disclosed in the application or a resume or anything else that were disqualified. But I can't tell you by race how many people will fail or pass. I know that we have 2 black men on our department now that are good officers, and I wish we had more. And I agree with Reverend Brown that it's important to include more minority people in the departments of the town, whatever department that might be, to serve the residents of this town. And I think that we make a concerted effort to make that happen if we can.
Absolutely, as long as they're qualified.
As they're qualified.
Whoever's qualified.
Very good, everybody. Well, listen, it's 2 o'clock. I've taken 2 hours of your time today.
That's
Thank
all right.
you very much, and we will be in touch with each other.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everybody.